And welcome to Mr. Faye's Science Basement, where we're still talking about evolution. And today we're going to be talking about models of evolution. In other words, how does evolution work? That's what we're going to be looking at today. So this is a scrapbook entry. So realize that you do have three options. One, you can download and make your own copy and type on it digitally. Two, you can print it up and write on it with a pen or a pencil, cut it out and stick it in your scrapbook. Or you can simply open up a nice blank page in your scrapbook and go freestyle. It is up to you. But please pause the video now if you do not have your materials and go and get them at this point. Cool. We are going to start off with a pretty straightforward but not question. One, why do you think giraffes have long necks? Now, before you pause the video and write down a response, realize we are not looking for the simple response of giraffes need to have long necks to reach the leaves that are on the tall trees. That's not going to work, okay? That's a good elementary school response. It shows that you understand the idea of animal adaptations. However, we're looking for how did they actually develop their long necks, okay? So how does a giraffe's long neck develop over time? So please pause the video now and write a quick response, and we'll check in with you in a moment. All right, so I'm sure that you guys have some great thoughts as to how this works. Here are two ways of thinking that other scientists have looked at it in the past. We're going to take a look at two scientists. We're going to take a look at Lamarck over here and Darwin over here. Now, Darwin is super famous, and I'm sure you've heard of Charles Darwin. I'm sure you've heard of Darwinian evolution, all those great things. And this guy named Lamarck is a little bit more obscure. However, believe it or not, most people who think they understand how evolution works or what it is when they're discussing it are actually thinking of something called Lamarckian evolution, which is actually a concept that is no longer accepted in the scientific community. So let's take a look at how Lamarck attempts to answer this question about how giraffes develop their long necks over time. Okay, best thing to do, I'd say, would be to take a look at this picture. This shows the evolution of a giraffe over time. So every generation, the neck is just a little bit longer, a little bit longer, and a little bit longer as it stretches and tries to reach those leaves in the taller and taller trees. Believe it or not, if you ask most people, that's what they would say evolution is: a slow, gradual change over time that allows something to be better suited for its environment. However, this is actually riddled with problems, this idea, because the way that this would have to happen is through this idea of use of a limb or use of a body part. Lamarck assumes that if you stretch your neck, and you try to eat some leaves, and your neck might get longer through stretching, which is a possibility. You keep strengthening those muscles and maybe get that neck to be a little bit longer. Well, you can stretch your neck all you want, but you're not going to pass that longer neck onto your offspring. It's like me going to the gym, working out 2 hours a day, getting completely buff and ripped, and then expecting to have muscle babies when I go to have children. Okay, that lifting does not affect my DNA. Therefore, it doesn't affect my offspring and the genes that they inherit. The most simple and kind of absurd example of this would be is if I were to dye my hair blonde, that does not change my Punnett square for my offspring and does not increase their chances of getting blonde hair, simply because my genes still code for black hair. The same is true here. Lamarck believes in this idea of use and disuse. If you use something, it will get stronger. If you disuse it or don't use it, then it will fall by the wayside. Now, the problem is, again, you can't inherit characteristics that you acquire during your lifetime. So Lamarck is often criticized for his idea of talking about the inheritance of acquired characteristics. You cannot inherit characteristics that you acquire during your lifetime because it doesn't change your DNA. It just changed the physiology of your immediate body. So that one argument is not as strong. Darwin's ideas are a little bit more complicated, but if you think about it, they actually make a good deal of sense. Now, I've got a whole bunch of letters here, and these just help really trace me through the process. And these are some words you should definitely know as we're talking about Darwin. And we can look at this little picture down here. Now, here we have a lot of giraffes, okay? And that's one of the first of his principles that he wants to state before he talks about evolution, is he talks about ecosystems tend to be overpopulated. In other words, there are too many giraffes born to be sustained by the amount of leaves that are there. So there's a certain amount of overpopulation. And in that population, there's a certain amount of variation. Now, this is something that actually makes a lot of sense, depending on a lot of the things we've already talked about. If you were to line up a whole population of giraffes, some would be a little bit taller, some would be a little bit shorter, some would have longer necks, some would have a little bit shorter necks. It's the same as lining up all the people in our class period. If you line up our whole class, some people are going to be taller, some people are going to be shorter, some people are going to have longer arms, some people are going to have shorter arms. There's natural variation in that population. So if we're overpopulated and there's natural variation in the lengths of the necks of giraffe, that sets up a competition. And if there is a competition for resources, the giraffes that have necks that are better suited to reach those leaves are going to be more successful. They are going to have an advantage or an adaptation. So in this situation where there's natural variation in this giraffe population, some naturally, almost randomly by chance, are going to be better suited for their environment and have a better adaptation. Because of that, there's going to be a certain amount of natural selection taking place. So if you take a look right here, there's our shortest neck giraffe, and unfortunately, he has passed away. Okay, so what happens is these giraffes here, the ones that get the food, are able to have offspring and pass their genes on to their offspring, where this guy right here is not going to be making babies anytime soon because he's dead. Okay, and he's dead simply because of the natural variation of the length of his neck. So in the next generation of giraffes that you look at, the short neck genes that coded for that short neck giraffe are now done. They've reached a dead end. So what do we have in the next generation? Only the tall ones. Now do that again, where the tallest ones that are varied tend to be more successful and the shorter ones tend to be less. And it's going to move your population in a direction where generation after generation, the shorter neck giraffes will be dying off, and that's what leaves you with what you have today. So Darwin's really grim answer to this question is like, where are the short-necked giraffes? The short-necked giraffes are dead. Why do you think the giraffes have long necks? Because the short ones didn't make it. All right, and they didn't pass their genes on to their offspring. If you're wondering what the S is right here, this then projects out to this concept of speciation, which we're actually going to be talking about in a later video where we talk about how this could give rise to animals with completely different characteristics, and not just animals, but plants also. Something I want to note incredibly quickly, and you'll probably watch a video on this, is that Darwin came up with most of his ideas in the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America. I think he went as like a cartographer or geologist on a boat called the Beagle in the 1800s, and he actually noticed a whole lot of different not only animal variation, but a lot of different adaptations. And it got him thinking about these concepts up here as to how life could have developed on these remote Galapagos Islands, which are pretty cool. Some of the most famous animals are the Galapagos tortoise, the Galapagos iguana, and the most important in Darwin's theory, Darwin's finches. And you're actually going to learn in a lab activity that we do later about the amount of finch diversity on the Galapagos Islands. If you take a look here, you're going to notice these represent each of the different species or varieties of finch that we have on that island. And you can see how their beaks have the adaptation to eat different things through different processes. So this is kind of an interesting little thing to take a look at up close. Cool, I zoomed in just a little bit so we can see what we're going with here. So you can see this right here represents the large ground finch, and This finch, including these others, have edge-crushing beaks, and they have crushing bills, and they eat mainly plant food. Okay, but you can see that there's also the vegetarian finch, which has a biting tip that eats plant food. And you can see how you can read this lots of different ways here. Over here, we have the small tree finch, which has a biting tip, and it has a grasping bills, and it eats mainly animal food. So that's just pointing out all the different varieties of finch and what their adaptations are and how they use those adaptations. And we'll see this a lot in lab as we work our way through the concept. So hopefully that helps, talking a little bit about Darwin and Darwin's idea of natural selection as a model for evolution.